Consistency isn't just some trendy word people throw around to get fired up for a few days. It's what you do every day that shapes you step by step. If you've ever watched someone stick to a routine so well that it looks easy, it's not because they have some special trick. It's because they've made it part of who they are. It's not something they do when they feel like it, it's something they do no matter what. They don't sit around waiting for the perfect moment or the right mood. They know that steady effort beats random bursts of motivation every time. Motivation comes and goes. One day you feel unstoppable, the next day you don't feel like doing a thing. If you rely on that, you'll get stuck, distracted, or start doubting yourself. But when you build consistency into your day, it stops being about how you feel and becomes about what you do. You don't have to think about it, you just show up. Whether it's learning a skill, staying in shape, or chasing something important, consistency keeps you moving forward long after motivation fades. Over time, these small, steady efforts add up to real progress. Every morning or night, you make the choice to keep going. Not just when everything is perfect, but when it's good enough to take another step. This daily habit replaces those all or nothing bursts of effort with something steady, something reliable. Think of it like laying bricks to build a solid house. You don't throw up all the walls in one day, you lay one brick at a time. Even on the rough days, if you can at least put down one brick, you're still moving forward. That's the power of consistency. Every small win reminds you that you're capable, that progress doesn't have to be rushed. It just has to keep happening. And when things go wrong, as they always do, you don't feel like you're starting over from scratch. You've already built something. You've got a pattern, a rhythm, proof that you can push through. That makes all the difference when it comes to staying in the fight. Structure strengthens consistency. It gives you more than just a wish or a loose plan. It gives you a solid routine to follow. That routine keeps you grounded, making it harder for doubt or distractions to pull you off course. The more you stick to it, the less you have to rely on sheer willpower. You stop wasting energy deciding whether to do something. You just do it because it's part of your day. Consistency can feel out of reach when you start off strong, full of energy, only to slip back into old habits a few days later. A goal might seem exciting at first, but then life gets busy, distractions creep in, and suddenly you're off track. A lot of people struggle with this because they try to change everything at once, making big promises and relying on bursts of motivation. But motivation fades, and when it does, those big plans fall apart. The power of this anchor comes from its simplicity. The easier your daily routine is to follow, the more likely you are to stick with it. If your plan is too complicated, it turns into something you dread instead of something you to maintain. That's why the best approach is built on small, manageable wins. Maybe you spend just 15 minutes improving a skill, or do a short but focused workout. On their own, these actions might seem too small to matter. But done consistently, they add up in ways you don't expect. Not just by making you better at what you're doing, but by changing how you see yourself. The real transformation happens when consistency stops being something you force and starts being part of who you are. When you keep showing up, you prove to yourself that you're the kind of person who follows through. That belief becomes a cycle. You act consistently because that's now your standard, not just a temporary effort. And that shift, more than anything, is what turns a habit into something unshakable. Timing matters when it comes to staying consistent. If you try to do something when you're drained or surrounded by distractions, chances are you'll either skip it or rush through it without real effort. That's why it helps to pay attention to your natural rhythm. When you're most alert, when you have the most energy, and when you're least likely to be pulled away. Some things are best tackled early in the morning when your mind is clear. Other tasks might fit better in the afternoon when your body is warmed up. It's not about forcing a strict schedule. It's about finding the right time for the right task. That small adjustment might not seem like a big deal, but it removes a lot of the struggle that makes habits hard to maintain. When something fits naturally into your day, you're far more likely to stick with it day after day. Habits keep you grounded, but they don't build themselves. You have to set them up on purpose. A new routine doesn't just fall into place. You have to push it into motion at the start. Take learning a musical instrument, for example. If you want to practice every day, don't leave your instrument packed away in a case or hidden in a corner. Put it where you'll see it. And don't just hope you'll find time. Tie it to something you already do without thinking. Maybe you pick it up right after breakfast or as soon as you walk in the door from work. This method, often called habit stacking, works because it removes the need to constantly decide when or whether to practice. Your brain starts linking the two actions together. At first, it takes effort. But after enough repetition, it feels natural, almost automatic. Eventually, skipping practice will feel like breaking the pattern. And that's when you know the habit has taken hold. Consistency works best when you focus on the process instead of just the end result. A lot of people judge success only by whether they've hit a big milestone, forgetting that real progress happens in the daily steps leading up to it. But consistency isn't about one big moment. It's about showing up every single day and doing what needs to be done. When you shift your mindset to the journey itself, you take some of the pressure off. All that matters is completing today's step. That alone means you're still on track. And when setbacks happen, and they always do, you don't feel like a failure just because you haven't reached the finish line yet. Your self-worth isn't tied to some distant outcome. It's built on the fact that you stuck to your plan. If you did what you set out to do today, then you've already won at consistency. Challenges will come. Unexpected problems, low energy doubts about whether you're even on the right track. That's just part of the process. But this is where daily consistency becomes your greatest ally. You don't have to wake up every morning feeling inspired. You don't have to wait for motivation to strike. You just follow the pattern you've already built. That pattern becomes your safety net. On the days when everything feels like an uphill climb, you don't waste time debating whether you should keep going. You don't ask yourself, do I feel like doing this today? Because feelings change. Instead, you remind yourself, this is what I do. That simple shift removes hesitation. You don't give yourself an easy way out. You just show up. Because that's the standard you've set. A day-by-day approach doesn't just keep you on track. It also helps you get better step by step. When you work at something consistently, you don't just make progress, you also build a record of lessons. You spot mistakes faster, see patterns sooner, and adjust before too much time is wasted. That kind of steady improvement is impossible if you only put in effort once in a while. Once you lock into a steady routine, something important happens. You start believing in yourself. You prove that you can stick to something, even when it's not easy. And that confidence doesn't just stay in one place. It spreads. If you can stay consistent with exercise or reading every day, what else can you tackle? Maybe a new skill, better financial habits, or anything else that once seemed too big to take on. The formula doesn't change. Keep it simple. Set up a routine you can actually follow. Stick to it no matter what. And over time, the results will take care of themselves. It's not about quick wins. It's about stacking small victories, day after day, until the work you've put in speaks for itself. Some people worry that sticking to a steady routine will kill spontaneity, that it'll make life feel rigid or joyless. But the truth is, structure actually gives you more freedom. When you know your important tasks are handled, you don't have to stress over whether you should be doing something else. That means when something fun or unexpected comes up, you can enjoy it without guilt. Because you're not neglecting your progress. This balance. Consistent effort combined with room to breathe is what makes long-term success possible. You're not running yourself into the ground, but you're also not letting things slide. You stay on track without burning out. And that's the key to making consistency last, not just for a week or a month, but for the long haul. Long-term consistency depends on knowing why you're doing something. A lot of routines fail because they're built on shallow or rushed goals. Things that seem exciting at first but lose their appeal once the initial enthusiasm wears off. If your reason for doing something is vague, it's easy to start skipping days, especially when progress isn't obvious right away. But when every small step is tied to something bigger, your health, your craft, your contribution to others, it stops feeling like just another task. It becomes part of something meaningful. The routine isn't a burden, it's an investment in what actually matters to you. And this requires honesty. If you say you're too busy but still find time for distractions, the issue isn't time, it's purpose. That doesn't mean you're lazy or lack discipline. It just means you might not have a strong enough reason driving your actions yet. When you lock onto a purpose that truly matters, consistency follows. Not because you have to force it, but because it becomes something you want to do. If you want to stay consistent, you have to know why you're doing it. Not just some vague idea, but a reason that actually matters to you. If your goal doesn't line up with what you truly value, it'll never feel urgent. You'll find yourself going through the motions. Or worse, giving up. Because deep down, it just doesn't mean enough. But when your reason is real, consistency stops feeling like a chore. It becomes a promise you keep to yourself, not something you're doing just because someone else said you should. One way to stay locked in is to ask yourself, what does success look like today? Not in some distant, overwhelming way, but in terms of what small, meaningful progress looks like in the next few hours. The big picture can feel intimidating, but focusing on just today makes things clearer. If you're learning a language, success isn't fluency. It's reviewing vocabulary for 10 minutes. If you're working on art, it's not painting a masterpiece. It's completing one focused sketch. These little wins might not seem like much in the moment, but stack them up over weeks, months, and years, and they turn into real progress. Making consistency easier starts with controlling your environment. If you're constantly surrounded by distractions, staying on track becomes an uphill battle. Say you've committed to writing every evening, but the second you sit down, you see your phone lighting up, the TV remote within reach, or clutter all around you. Now, instead of getting straight to work, you have to fight the urge to do something else. The solution? Remove the temptations before they become a problem. Clear the space. Put your phone in another room. Whatever it takes to make starting easier. The fewer choices you have to wrestle with, the easier it is to stick to your routine. You don't have to win a mental battle every time. You just set yourself up so that doing the right thing is the path of least resistance. When your environment is working with you instead of against you, consistency stops being a struggle and starts feeling like the natural flow of your day. What you tell yourself matters. If you constantly think, I always quit, or I never follow through, you start believing it. And when you believe something about yourself, you act in ways that prove it right. That's how the mind works. If inconsistency feels inevitable, it's because you've told yourself that story so many times that it's become the truth in your head. But you can flip that script. Instead of reinforcing failure, you start feeding yourself a different message. I'm someone who values daily growth. I'm someone who shows up. At first, it might feel unnatural, like you're just saying words. But repetition matters. The more you tell yourself this, the more you start acting like it's true. And the actions come first. Show up, do the work, and over time you won't just be saying it. You'll be proving it. This isn't about ignoring struggle or pretending discipline is easy. It's about choosing language that pushes you forward instead of pulling you back. Your mind listens to what you tell it, so give it something worth believing in. Consistency is built on habits, but life doesn't always cooperate. Unexpected events, travel, emergencies, or last-minute commitments will throw off your schedule. If your plan is too rigid, it breaks the moment things go off track. And once it breaks, it's easy to let everything unravel. The solution? Flexibility. When you can't stick to your full routine, you adjust instead of quitting. Maybe you can't get in a full workout, but you can do a few push-ups. Maybe you don't have time for an hour of writing, but you can jot down a quick paragraph. The point isn't perfection. It's keeping the habit alive, even in a smaller form. This approach stops you from falling into an all-or-nothing mindset. One missed day doesn't have to turn into 2, then 3, then giving up entirely. You train yourself to keep moving no matter the circumstances. And over time, that mindset becomes just as valuable as the habit itself. The ability to adapt, adjust, and stay in the fight no matter what life throws at you. Tracking your progress makes consistency stronger. Even something as simple as marking off each completed day on a calendar gives a small sense of satisfaction. It's proof that you showed up, and that matters. Over time, this record becomes more than just a list. It becomes a visual reminder of your effort, something you don't want to break. But tracking also does something else. It shows you patterns. Maybe you're solid Monday through Friday, but tend to skip on weekends. Maybe certain times of the month throw you off. When you see these trends, you can adjust instead of wondering why you keep falling off track. And then there's the streak effect. The longer you keep it going, the harder it is to stop. You look at the record and think, I've come this far. I'm not about to quit now. That simple thought is often enough to push through on days when motivation is low. You don't want to break the chain, so you show up again. And that's the power of tracking. It turns consistency into momentum, making each day a little easier than the last. Consistency isn't about mindless repetition. It's not about doing the exact same thing forever. You're allowed to adjust, refine, and improve as you go. The key is to keep the steady rhythm of progress without constantly jumping from one thing to the next with no direction. Think of it like a strong heartbeat. It stays steady, but it can speed up or slow down depending on what's needed. Your routine should work the same way. You stay committed to showing up every day, but you allow room for change. Whether that means tweaking your methods, shifting your focus, or adjusting your strategy as you learn what works best. This balance between stability and adaptability is what keeps you moving forward. If you're too rigid, you burn out or get stuck in a system that no longer serves you. If you're too loose, you lose direction and consistency falls apart. But when you keep the commitment steady while allowing smart adjustments, you create a system that lasts. One that pushes you forward while giving you the flexibility to grow, adapt, and refine your approach over time. Consistency doesn't take away hard work. It directs it. You're still putting in effort, but instead of exhausting yourself in bursts and then crashing, you spread it out in steady, manageable steps. That's why people who commit to a daily formula often find it freeing rather than restrictive. They're no longer stuck in a cycle of all-out effort followed by long periods of doing nothing. Instead, they move forward at a sustainable pace, balancing action with rest. And at the core of this approach is trust. You trust that small, steady actions add up. You trust the process, even when the results aren't immediate. Most importantly, you trust yourself. Trust that you're capable of showing up day after day and doing what needs to be done. That trust becomes its own momentum. The more you prove to yourself that you can be consistent, the easier it is to keep going. It's easy to compare yourself to others and think they have some special drive or discipline you don't. But in most cases, what sets them apart isn't raw willpower. It's that they've built a system that keeps them aligned with where they want to go. They don't wake up every day asking themselves whether they feel like doing the work. They already know why it matters, and that keeps them moving. That alignment is the difference. When doubts creep in and you think, why bother today? The answer isn't something you have to search for. It's already built into your routine. Every small action is part of a bigger plan. That's why they keep showing up, and it's why you can too. It's not about forcing motivation. It's about creating a path that naturally leads you forward, one day at a time. Distractions have always been around. Even decades ago, people found ways to lose time, idle conversations, aimless wandering, or letting the day slip by without direction. Every generation has its own set of diversions. Today, it might be endless scrolling, binge watching, or getting lost in side hobbies that pull you away from what truly matters. The specifics change, but the challenge remains the same. Do you control your time, or does something else? Consistency isn't about avoiding every distraction. It's about knowing when to put them aside and focus on what needs to be done. It's about deciding in the moment that your primary task comes first. This isn't self-denial. It's discipline. It's choosing what deserves your attention rather than letting your attention get stolen. The more you practice this, the easier it becomes. Over time, you don't have to fight yourself as much. When you start drifting, you recognize it and correct course without hesitation. It stops being a struggle and starts being second nature. The habit of showing up, doing the work, and not letting distractions take you off track. Consistency teaches patience. When you commit to steady, daily effort, you stop expecting instant results. You realize that real progress isn't about massive breakthroughs. It's about showing up again and again, stacking small wins that eventually add up to something significant. Each action you take is like casting a vote for the future you want. Some days the progress is clear. Other days it feels like nothing is happening. That's where most people quit. They check too soon, don't see results, and assume it's not working. But consistency teaches you to trust the process, to understand that even when progress is slow or invisible, it's still happening. Patience isn't about waiting around. It's about continuing the work, even when the payoff isn't immediate. The more you practice this, the less you rely on quick wins to stay motivated. You stop chasing fast results and start embracing steady, lasting growth. And that's the difference between those who burn out and those who actually reach their goals. Small wins keep consistency from feeling like a grind. If you're learning a language, note how many words you've picked up each week. If you're writing daily, finishing a set number of pages is worth acknowledging. A simple reward. A walk, a conversation, or just recognizing progress reinforces the habit. Who you spend time with affects your consistency. Being around people who value steady effort makes it easier to stay on track. When you share goals, exchange tips, or check in with someone, accountability happens naturally. On the other hand, if you're constantly around those who dismiss your routine or pull you into distractions, it's easy to drift. This doesn't mean cutting people off. It just means making sure you have at least a few voices that push you towards steady progress instead of sporadic effort. Life changes and consistency has to change with it. A rigid plan that doesn't adjust to new work schedules, family responsibilities, or unexpected obstacles is bound to fall apart. But if you focus on the principle of daily effort rather than a fixed routine, you can adapt without losing momentum. Maybe your usual morning slot isn't possible for a while due to travel or extra duties. Instead of quitting, you shift to evenings or another available time. The key isn't doing things exactly the same way every day. It's making sure you still show up. Consistency isn't about sticking to one rigid plan. It's about staying committed, no matter how the details shift. Regular reflection sharpens consistency. Checking in monthly or quarterly helps you spot patterns. Where you're improving, where you're stuck, and whether adjustments are needed. Are you hitting your daily targets? Do certain areas feel stagnant? Without reflection, routines can slip into autopilot, losing their effectiveness. But by reviewing progress, you keep your approach alive, ensuring it evolves with your goals rather than becoming mindless repetition. How you handle failure matters. Missing a day or falling short isn't proof that you lack consistency. It's just a signal to get back on track. One skipped session or a half-hearted effort doesn't erase the work you've already done. The only thing that matters is that you show up the next day. Seeing setbacks as temporary keeps you from spiraling into defeat. Too many people let one misstep undo all their progress. But if you treat it as a small detour rather than a disaster, you maintain momentum. The key isn't perfection. It's persistence. Intrinsic motivation is important, but external reinforcement helps when motivation dips. Over time, this blend of personal drive and outside support makes consistency feel natural. Not like a struggle, but like something you simply do. Consistency thrives when you respect your own limitations. Everyone has different energy levels, responsibilities, and challenges, so forcing a rigid, one-size-fits-all routine can backfire. Instead of pushing through a schedule that drains you, it's smarter to shape your plan around what actually works. If early mornings leave you sluggish, forcing a pre-dawn routine might kill your motivation in a week. But shifting to lunchtime or evenings could make the habit easier to maintain. The key isn't the exact hour. It's the act of showing up daily. When your schedule works with you instead of against you, consistency stops feeling like a battle and becomes part of your natural rhythm. One of the biggest obstacles to consistency is expecting the perfect routine. You might picture long, uninterrupted sessions in a quiet space with full focus, only to realize life doesn't work that way. Chores, errands, unexpected demands, and shifting emotions all get in the way. If you cling too tightly to that ideal scenario, the first disruption can throw you completely off track. A stronger mindset is one that adapts. Instead of thinking, I can't do my full session, so I'll skip today, you say, I'll do a shorter version. Maybe you only draft a rough outline instead of a polished piece. Maybe you do a quick workout instead of a full session. These small adjustments keep your momentum alive. A simple way to reinforce consistency is by visualizing success before you start. It takes just seconds, but it makes a difference. Picture how you'll feel after completing today's action. The satisfaction of finishing those pages, the physical relief of a workout, the clarity after practicing a skill. Often hesitation comes from overestimating the effort while forgetting the reward. But if you make a habit of mentally linking the action to its payoff, starting becomes easier. Over time, this small mental rehearsal becomes a natural trigger, helping you slip into your routine with less resistance. Adding micro challenges to your routine keeps it fresh and engaging. If you're writing daily, try pushing for a few more words than yesterday. If you're practicing an instrument, focus on mastering one tricky passage each session. These small targets inject a sense of progress and discovery into the repetition. Micro goals also bring clarity. Instead of just going through the motions, you know exactly what you're working toward each day. This prevents your routine from feeling like a dull checklist and turns each session into a meaningful step forward. Over time, these small challenges keep your practice dynamic, ensuring consistency remains a path to growth rather than a mechanical grind. Consistency isn't just an individual effort. It's often strengthened by the people around you. While internal drive matters, having family, friends, or a community that supports your routine can make a real difference. A simple check-in, a word of encouragement, or even someone casually asking about your progress can help keep you on track when motivation dips. Accountability partnerships take this a step further. When you commit to sharing your daily goal with someone who does the same, skipping out becomes harder. You don't want to let them down, and you certainly don't want to explain why you didn't follow through without a good reason. Over time, this kind of mutual support turns your routine from a solo effort into something shared. One where progress feels recognized and reinforced, making it easier to keep going. Consistency and persistence go hand in hand with self-compassion. It's easy to be hard on yourself when you miss a day or don't see results fast enough. But harsh self-criticism can do more harm than good, making it tempting to quit altogether. Being kind to yourself doesn't mean making excuses. It means recognizing that setbacks happen and improvement takes time. If you slip, you don't punish yourself. You reflect, adjust if needed, and get back on track. Ironically, this mindset strengthens consistency in the long run. When you stop treating every mistake like a failure, you're more likely to keep going instead of giving up at the first sign of imperfection. Doubt will come. Some days you'll wonder if your effort is leading anywhere. Progress can feel invisible, like watching a plant that never seems to grow. But just because you don't see change doesn't mean it isn't happening. Like roots spreading beneath the surface, your consistent actions build skill, understanding, and resilience, quietly, steadily. Then one day it clicks. A performance improves. A project nears completion. Someone points out how far you've come. And you realize the progress was there all along. You just had to trust the process. That moment of clarity reinforces why the steady daily approach works, even when the results aren't immediately obvious.